All right, so everybody wants to be happy, right? But it kind of feels like sometimes we're getting it all wrong, like chasing after some kind of fantasy instead of, like actually living it. Okay, I just got to figure out the right steps and bam, instant happiness. But, I've been reading this book, Build the Life You Want by Oprah and this Harvard professor, Arthur Brooks. And honestly, it's like a total mind shift. They totally busted so many myths I've been carrying around about happiness, like one of the biggest ones, that it's all about our circumstances. It's so easy to fall into that trap, right? Like, oh, I'll be happy when I get that promotion or when I finally meet the right person. It's like we put our happiness on hold, waiting for those perfect conditions. But Oprah and Arthur are saying is that kind of thinking is exactly what keeps us stuck. Instead of waiting for things to change, they say we need to build happiness from within. Like they have this story about Albina Quevedo, and she went through some seriously tough stuff. I mean, imagine growing up during the Spanish Civil War and then dealing with poverty and even having your husband leave for like 14 years. I mean, that's intense, right? But the thing is, when she was 45, she decided to just totally take charge of her life. She went back to school, became a teacher, and found this incredible joy in her career. And her story really resonated with me because, a few years back, I was in this real rut. I was in this dead end job, feeling totally uninspired. And I kept telling myself, okay, once I quit this job and finally start my own thing, then I'll be happy. But honestly, looking back, it was just an excuse. I was using my job as a scapegoat for my own, lack of happiness. And Albina's story, it was like this wake up call. It reminded me that we always have a choice, even when things are tough. We can choose to focus on what's wrong, or we could choose to find ways to make things better. It's about shifting our perspective and actually taking action. Another big myth the book tackles is this whole idea that happiness equals pleasure. And honestly, it makes sense, right? Like, we live in this world that's obsessed with instant gratification. It's all about buy this, experience that, get that dopamine rush. But the truth is, pleasure, it fades so fast. Like, remember that feeling after you have a whole slice of chocolate cake? The first bite is amazing, and that's what the authors call, fleeting happiness. They argue that what we actually need is enjoyment, like a deeper, more lasting kind of happiness. They make this analogy with a delicious meal, right? Pleasure, it's like that first bite, that initial excitement, but enjoyment, that's about savoring the whole experience, from picking the ingredients to like actually cooking the meal and sharing it with the people you love. It's about the process, the effort, the connection. So the book goes into these three like macronutrients of happiness, right? There's enjoyment, which we just talked about, and then there's satisfaction, which comes from achieving things, like overcoming challenges and feeling that, yes, I did it kind of feeling. It's about pushing ourselves, seeing what we're actually capable of. And then the third one is purpose, which is about living a life that feels meaningful. And that could be anything from volunteering to like raising a family or even just doing work that lights you up. It's about feeling connected to something bigger than yourself. Like you're actually making a difference. But okay, let's be real for a sec. Life, it's not always sunshine and rainbows, right? We all have those moments where we feel anxious, sad, angry, all those not so fun feelings. And that's where this idea of metacognition comes in. It's this skill where you can observe your own thoughts and emotions without getting like totally swept away by them. Yeah, kind of like being a scientist, but for your own mind. Yeah, you notice the feelings, but you don't let them run the show. So, say you're super stressed about giving a presentation at work, right? Instead of letting the anxiety take over, you can pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, hold on, what exactly is making me feel this way? Is it public speaking? Is it the content itself? And once you figure out where it's coming from, you can start tackling it. Like maybe you practice the presentation a bunch more to get comfortable. Or maybe you break it down into smaller chunks so it feels less overwhelming. And here's where it gets interesting. they talk about this idea of emotional caffeine, right? Like just how a cup of coffee can perk you up, certain positive emotions can actually help block those negative ones. It's like a mood booster. And some of these emotional caffeines are gratitude, humor, hope, and compassion. It's about consciously inviting those feelings in to shift our perspective, you know? Like, I remember this one time I was going through a breakup and I was just feeling so heartbroken. It felt like my world was falling apart. And then I remembered something from the book about the power of gratitude. So I started a gratitude journal, and just focused on everything I was thankful for: my health, my amazing friends, my family. And it wasn't like some magic solution, but it definitely helped. Shifting my focus to the positive helped me feel less overwhelmed by the sadness. It gave me some space to breathe and see things more clearly. So, how do we actually get more of these emotional caffeines into our lives? The book talks about simple things like keeping a gratitude journal, watching a funny movie, or even just spending quality time with people you love. It's about actively seeking out those things that lift us up and help us feel more connected to ourselves and the world around us. And honestly, even those small shifts can make such a big difference. So we'd like scratch the surface of happiness, right? What it is, what it isn't. But what about those like real life situations that can totally mess with our happiness vibe? Like relationships, work, all that stuff will build the life you want. It goes deep into these areas. And honestly, some of the stuff they say is pretty surprising. Like when it comes to relationships, they're not all about finding someone who's, like perfectly compatible. It's not about that whole you complete me thing. Instead, they talk about complementarity, which is kind of like it. The idea that our differences can actually like make a relationship stronger. Think about it. Dating someone who's basically your clone. Same hobbies, same opinions, even the same weird quirks. I mean, it sounds kind of boring, right? Like, I had this friend who was dating this guy, and they were so alike. It was almost freaky. Like, indie music, vegan food, they even collected vintage postcards. Both of them. And at first, they were convinced it was, like, destiny meant to be. But then after a while, it just felt kind of, I don't know, stale. Like they were so comfortable, they weren't really growing or like pushing each other to try new things. And it made me realize that sometimes those little differences, those different perspectives, they're what keep things exciting. It's about finding that balance between like shared values and your own unique quirks, right? And this whole complementarity thing, it goes for friendships too. I have this one friend who's super extroverted, life of the party type, and then another friend who's like way more introspective. Honestly, at first, I thought they totally clash, but they end up becoming super close. The extrovert, like, pulls the introvert out of her shell sometimes, and the introvert, well, she helps the extrovert, find some chill. It's this perfect balance. The book also dives into how technology has affected our relationships, which, I mean, come on, that's a big one these days, right? Like, on one hand, social media, it's great for staying connected with people, especially if they're far away. But on the other hand, it can create this crazy comparison game. I remember when I first joined Instagram, I was constantly like comparing myself to everyone else, their vacations, their homes, their like seemingly perfect lives. It made me feel so inadequate. But then I realized it's all a facade, right? People mostly show the highlight reel, not the, behind the scenes mess. Once I figured that out, it was way easier to like use social media in a healthier way. The book really emphasizes being mindful of our tech use, making sure it's not getting in the way of real connection. Like instead of scrolling for another hour, why not call a friend? Or even better, meet up for coffee or something. It's those real life interactions that really matter. Okay, speaking of things that matter, let's talk about work. I mean, most of us spend so much time working, right? And if we're not careful, it can totally take over our lives and leave us feeling drained and unhappy. And build the life you want, it gets that. They know work is a big part of life for most people, but they also say it doesn't have to be something we dread. Like, it's about finding work that feels meaningful, fulfilling, something that actually aligns with what you care about. I remember a few years back, I was stuck in this corporate job. I was good at it, but it just didn't feel purposeful. Like I wasn't making a real difference. It was just paperwork and meetings, meetings, meetings. And then I discovered this whole freelance writing world, and I started taking on projects that I was actually passionate about, writing about things that mattered to me, working with people who inspired me. And suddenly it didn't feel like work anymore. It was more like, I don't know, an extension of me. Of course, not everyone could just like quit their job and follow their passion, but even in our current jobs, we can find ways to make them more enjoyable. So, like looking for opportunities to learn and grow, connecting with colleagues who share your values, and finding ways to make a difference, even if it's small. And let's be real for a sec, work addiction is a thing. It's so easy to get caught up in that hustle culture, always striving to be more productive, more efficient, more successful. But sometimes, and the book talks about this, we use work to avoid dealing with other stuff in our lives. Like we numb ourselves with busyness, which never really works, right? It's like trying to outrun your own shadow. I've totally been there. There was a time when I was working nonstop, taking on every project, even if it meant sacrificing like sleep, exercise, time with loved ones. I thought I was being super productive, but I was actually running away from stuff. Like, what if I wasn't good enough? What if I failed? So I just kept myself busy, busy, busy. But eventually, I crashed. I was burnt out, stressed, and totally disconnected from myself. It was a wake up call. I realized I needed to create some balance, set boundaries, prioritize self care, and actually, like, allow myself to feel my emotions and build the life you want. And some great tips on how to spot work addiction and create a healthier approach to work, like scheduling downtime, being mindful of tech use, and actually doing things you enjoy outside of work. It's about remembering that your worth isn't tied to your productivity. We're more than just our jobs, right? It's so important to remember that and to like nurture the other parts of ourselves. Okay, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked when we talk about happiness, spirituality. And before you tune out, hear me out. I'm going to talk about like organized religion. It can be part of it, but it's more about connecting to something bigger than yourself, finding meaning, and cultivating a sense of peace. For a long time, I was kind of skeptical about this whole spirituality thing. I'm a pretty practical person, so the idea of connecting with something bigger just sounded kind of vague and, I don't know, woo woo. But then I started trying different things: meditation, yoga, journaling, even just spending more time in nature. And honestly, I was surprised by how much it shifted my perspective. It made me feel more grounded, more connected, more at peace. And the book talks about how having a spiritual practice, whatever that looks like for you, can really impact your happiness. It's about tapping into that sense of awe and wonder that we sometimes lose sight of. Like, I remember this one time I was hiking in the mountains and I reached this peak and the view was just incredible. I mean, I'd seen mountains before, but this time it was different. Standing there, feeling the wind, looking out at this vastness, I was just filled with this sense of awe. Like I felt so small, but also connected to something so much bigger, and made me realize that those moments of transcendence, they're everywhere if we just pay attention. You know what I really appreciate about this book? It's not about those like quick fix solutions or cheesy affirmations. It's not promising you'll be instantly happy if you just follow these 10 steps or whatever. It's way deeper than that. It's like it recognizes that happiness, it's not just one thing, it's this whole intricate web of stuff, our physical health, our mental state, relationships, our purpose, everything's like we got to see ourselves as this whole interconnected system, right? What we do in one area, it spills over into everything else. Like if we don't take care of our bodies, our mind's going to suffer too, That or if we're constantly stressed out from work, our relationships are going to feel it. It's all connected. Like I remember when I started making some of those changes they talk about in the book, like prioritizing sleep, eating healthier, setting boundaries at work. And it wasn't just about feeling better physically. My mood was better. I had more energy for stuff I actually enjoy. My relationships felt stronger. It was like this ripple effect. Everything started falling into place. And one of the things they really emphasize is the power of a positive mindset, which, let's be real, it's easier said than done sometimes, right? Our brains are kind of wired to focus on the negative, like it's scanning for danger all the time. Yeah, a fight or flight kind of thing. But the good news is we can actually retrain our brains to be more positive. And one of the most powerful ways to do that, gratitude. I used to think gratitude was this cheesy, fluffy thing. But then I started actually practicing it, And I was amazed by the difference it made. Like, there was this one time I was super stressed out about work deadlines. I was totally spiraling, couldn't sleep, snapping at people, the whole 9 yards. And then I remembered this thing from the book about writing down 10 things you're grateful for every single day for a week. So I tried it. It was tough at first, My mind was so fixated on all the stuff that was going wrong, it was hard to think of anything positive. But I kept at it. And slowly, I started noticing this shift. Instead of obsessing over what was going wrong, I was starting to appreciate the things that were actually good, like my health, my friends, even just having a place to live and food to eat. And yeah, it didn't magically erase the stress, but it helped me feel more grounded, more balanced, like I could handle it. And another powerful thing they talk about is connecting with something bigger than ourselves, whether that's through spirituality, religion, nature, being part of a community, whatever. It's about that feeling of belonging, of purpose. It makes a huge difference. It reminds us we're not alone in this crazy world, right? Like we're part of something bigger. Yeah. And that can be so comforting, especially when things are tough. Like I remember this time I was going through a really rough patch, feeling totally lost and unsure about everything. And a friend suggested I try volunteering at this animal shelter. Honestly, at first I wasn't sure. I always loved animals, but I didn't know if I had the time or energy. But I decided to go for it. And it was honestly one of the best things I've ever done. Spending time with those animals, taking care of them, playing with them, it just gave me this sense of purpose and joy. It made me realize, I do have something to offer, even if it's just a small thing. It was like, it reconnected me to my own humanity. So we've covered a lot about happiness, right? But it all boils down to this. It's a choice. Happiness, it's not just something that happens to us. We had created through our thoughts, our actions, our choices. And look, I'm not saying it's easy. Life throws us curveballs all the time. We face challenges, we stumble, we fall. But even when things are tough, we can still choose happiness. We can choose to focus on the good, to find meaning in the struggle, to keep moving forward. So as we wrap up this deep dive into build the life you want, I will leave you with this question. What's one small thing you can do today, right now, to boost your own happiness? Is it starting a gratitude journal? Calling a friend you haven't talked to in a while? Taking a walk in nature? Whatever it is, give it a try. You might be surprised by what happens. And if you want to dive deeper into this whole happiness thing, definitely check out Build the Life You Want by Oprah and Arthur Brooks. It's full of amazing insights and practical tips that can help you build a life that feels truly fulfilling. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Until then, drive safely and keep learning. I'll catch you on our next deep dive.